With less than 2 weeks to go until the by-election of the century, Question Time held a special episode involving some of the candidates vying to be the new MP for Makerfield. And the central question was, how can politicians restore trust in politics? Perhaps a fitting question because, as everyone knows, there's a lot more at stake for one of those candidates, with Labour's Andy Burnham thought to be eyeing up the leadership of the party if he wins. I say thought to, everybody knows he is. That potential path to Prime Minister came up on the show straight away.
I mean, you have to be hidden under a rock to think maybe you aren't going to go for the leadership against Keir. What changes are you going to make that Labour Party great again?
I mean, I'm making no assumptions about this election. I'm not, because you all know it's tight. You know that. Because you speak to people in your communities.
No, this is why you're running, Andy. Let's be clear about that.
Answer the question. I mean, it's an important question. It's not a given, and I don't see it as such. I'm fighting hard because, to me, it is about trying to rebuild politics and make it work for people here. And when I was in the cabinet, I had influence and I used it for people here. I've got the Lee Sports Village built. We've got Bickershaw Marina. I got a young girl who'd been abducted and taken to Libya. I got her back with her mum in Hindley Green. I have always used my political influence for people here. Hillsborough was another example. I've never abandoned this place at all. On Sunday, it's the 25th anniversary of me being an elected Greater Manchester representative. But I know I can't do everything within the system as it currently is. Right. So all I can say to you is, I would take the fight to change politics and change this country as high as I could so that it works for here. And it doesn't work for here right now.
Now, that answer really didn't satisfy some in the audience.
So I watch the programme all the time, every week. And
oh, good. I'm glad to hear it. Thank you very much.
And I just find that politicians can never answer a question straight. You ask them a question, you never get an answer. And it is so disappointing when Fiona asks you, will you stand, to challenge Keir Starmer, that you cannot say yes, that you will. We all know that you will, so why can't you just say it?
I'm not somebody who gets ahead of myself. I can't do anything unless I'm lucky enough to get the support of people here. But if I get your support, I would seek to represent you at the highest possible level and give this constituency maximum power and influence. I think Wes Streeting seems to have launched a leadership contest. So if that is running, I would seek to join it. But I'd have to persuade members of the Parliamentary Labour Party to do the same.
Aaron, what do you think of that? The answer to those questions on whether he's going to run? I mean, like everybody knows he is. That woman's quite right. Why not just say it?
Yeah, well, it's all gridded out, wasn't it? I think so. We'll find out these particular messages and headlines when we get them. Very professional press operation, it must be said. I thought he was really impressive. I thought he was really good. And something we don't talk about nearly enough in politics is age. Burnham's 56. He feels like a very different politician to when he was in his early 40s. Doesn't mean he's changed his views on anything. I think he probably has, but that's by the by. The style is much more calm, much more relaxed. And I actually saw this a lot with Starmer. I don't really praise Starmer very much because I don't think he should be praised. But one thing that was really noticeably different between Starmer and even Sunak, Truss, maybe even Boris Johnson, was he had that extra 10 years and he was just a lot calmer. And I think, I love young people in politics. But sometimes it's useful to just have somebody who's, the problem with Starmer is he's so calm, he's kind of dying. He's doing a terrible job. You need some oomph and some, up and at him. He doesn't have it. But I think with Burnham, he's really in the sweet spot of still being a young man. I think most people can relate to him. I think young and old can kind of relate to him. He's 56. He's still got lots of energy, but he's much more calm. And I think he's much more assured in himself in terms of media performance. I don't think people think, oh, well, therefore I support Andy Burnham. I think on some things he's moved in a good direction since being in the Blair cabinet, and on other things it's unclear where he's moved. But in terms of these kinds of situations, BBC Question Time, he's a really formidable person. It's very different to the politician we saw 11 years ago in the Labour leadership contest in 2015. He was very anxious. I think partly because he didn't really know what his place in the Labour Party was. He'd come out of the Blairite faction. He's kind of a creature of the soft left, but you had this huge membership on the radical left all of a sudden who weren't happy with his positions on welfare. I think post-Starmer, he's got quite an easy sell. I'm just going to be, as Prime Minister, what this guy promised to be, but didn't do it. That's quite easy, right? And that won a big mandate, both with the Labour Party, but also with the electorate. So that's quite easy for him to step into. And I think that means he can make the most of his kind of personality and his ease as a politician who's been doing this for more than 25 years now.
Yeah, there's something, he's very, this kind of like interesting combination of like relaxed and self-assured. So it doesn't look like, pompous or anything like that in the way that Keir Starmer can look. And he doesn't look sort of like twitchy, rabbit in the headlights like Keir Starmer can also look. He has like this feeling of like statesman-like, but also relatability. I guess what in America they call like the beer factor, right? You want to have a drink with him.
Yeah.
But I guess also to his advantage, he has the fact that a lot of people just feel like anyone but Starmer right now. So, he could literally, have that attitude, not really get too into the weeds about what he wants to do politically or policy-wise, has the kind of glow of Manchester behind him. And people are going to like him because, nobody wants Starmer. They know the Labour Party's not going anywhere for a couple of years. And they just don't see any talent in government, right? He's sort of everything is laid out for him, isn't it?
That's exactly right. And this is politics, isn't it? He tried to be the leader twice, didn't work in 2010 and 2015, didn't work. He leaves the party. I presume he leaves the parliamentary party, I should say. I presume he never thought this was going to happen. But now, like you say, we're in this sort of Goldilocks set of circumstances, which seems tailor-made for him. He's a politician who's part of the establishment, but not of it. He's from the Northwest. He's represented the Northwest. And like you say, he has that beer factor. I think what's interesting is, for him, we've heard, for instance, today some stuff about business rates. He was sympathetic with businesses that didn't want also increases to the employer national insurance contributions. These are things that people on the centre-right are going to really like to hear. They see that he's quite affable. They see he's got a track record of doing stuff. They might give Labour a second look. They're not really looking at reform because they're just too wacky and wild for them. It's a really, really interesting mix. The thing for him is he's going to have to land quickly. And there's talk today of, him keeping Rachel Reeves as Chancellor. On the one hand, that makes sense. You've got the markets. They need to stay calm. You don't want to change anything too quickly. But equally, you do want to offer a break with what has been a terrible 2 years for the country and for the Labour government. So choices like that are going to be the ones that I think that really define him quickly. But I think all the way through now, if he wins this by-election, big if, but if he wins this by-election, I can see him really gaining profile and his political brand becoming stronger and stronger. The real challenge will be as soon as he gets into number 10.
Yeah, that's a whole different story, right?
Yeah.
That's a massive different story. And also, I guess he doesn't have an electoral challenge for a few years, though. Once he gets in, he does have some time to work it out. It's just a question of whether he can get the support of the backbenchers to sort of stick with him if there are a few hiccups at the beginning, right?
Yeah.
And he's got to get that cabinet right straight away. I don't know about keeping Rachel Reeves. I feel like she's sort of so intimately bound with Keir Starmer that I'm not sure people will really believe it's a fresh start if she's still there.
I agree. Make her business secretary or something.
Give her a job, but just not that one. I thought I saw somewhere that he'd well, maybe this is briefing. It could be from Ops. I don't know, but that he'd offered it to Shabana Mahmood,
which would be crazy, I think.
But did you read that as well?
I did. I think Ed Miliband seems the most sensible option.
Yeah, totally.
And you'd keep Shabana Mahmood. Again, this is not my personal view, but I think that would be sensible. You keep Shabana Mahmood there. I would also say that, it's hard for Labour to do any worse than they've done in the last two local elections, right? It's hard for Labour to have a worse by-election result than what they've got in Gorton and Denton. So, he's also, we talked about the Goldilocks kind of circumstances. Another one is how badly Labour have been doing. Even if Labour go into local elections next May, his first set of local elections as PM, and they lose 200 councillors, people say, wow, that's so good compared to Starmer.
1,200 or whatever it was.
Yeah, I said this about Corbyn after 2015, and, I was proven right in 2017. People were saying how terrible he is. And I said, but hold on a second. Ed Miliband got 30% in 2015. Corbyn just needs to get 32%. And people are saying, okay, fine, he gets another go. That's all he had to do.
Yeah.
And 30% was actually quite low. It was quite bad. 28% with Gordon Brown made it look good, but 38% historically is quite bad in a two-party system. And of course, the Lib Dems were collapsing. So I think it's really all set up for Burnham. And if he screws up, it's one of those where it's on him. Some politicians come in, they have really tough circumstances thrown at them. You say Boris Johnson with COVID, for instance, as PM. I don't think that's the case for Burnham so far.
Well, let's go on to have a look at Burnham's major competitor, Reform UK's Robert Kenyon. He wanted to talk a little bit more about Burnham's potential career ambitions on the show.
Just go back to Billy's question about restoring trust. I think a big move away from career politicians would certainly help, and having normal people involved in politics. Andy touches on us being the fastest growing economy. Does anybody in Maker feel that we've got the fastest growing economy? Or is it all just kept in Manchester? We keep giving our council tax. There's a bigger percentage every year being taken by Manchester. While Manchester thrives, we're struggling to survive in Wigan. We've been left behind. So my point would be get normal people in politics, people who care about the place, people who live in the place and people who want to stay here and not use it as a stepping stone for other things.
I think that was quite a smart line, actually, to try and get Andy Burnham on the thing that he's sort of most admired for, which is being mayor of Manchester, even though, like, you know, he's not in charge of council tax, but, you know, associating him with actually ripping the people of the constituency off. Now, an archive of Robert Kenyon's old tweets recently turned up, revealing that he'd said some pretty unsavory and sexist things about women, including perhaps joking, perhaps not, endorsing a very explicit post about Carol Vorderman. Those, of course, featured on the show quite heavily.
I'd rather have a career politician than a plumber who's a sexist.
So, Rob, I want to give you a chance to answer that. You know, I want to give you a measure. So just for those of you may not all be aware of things that Rob has said in the past, you described yourself as sexist.
Allegedly.
What, you're denying that was a tweet by you?
No, some of the things, not...
OK, you described yourself as a sexist. You have made offensive comments about women. You've admitted that. You've also said that abortion is the cowardly act of women murdering defenceless baby and that women do it so they can shag anyone they want. That's your phrase, not mine. As I say, I'm raising it because lots of people in the audience raise it, and I want to give you a chance to answer.
That's OK. I'll address those questions. So I won't accept that label. I mean, a lot of the things have been said 15 years ago. I hold my hands up. I've made mistakes. And said
the one about abortion was just 2 to 3 years ago.
I'm just addressing the first point where she said, where I was given a label that I won't accept. I was brought up by a single parent and my grandma, who was a widow, and an older sister. So I was brought up by women. I've got nothing but respect for women. You know, so I think something that's said, 15 years ago, dragged up from an old rugby forum, it's completely taken out of context. And like I say, I've made mistakes. I said things years ago that I wouldn't say now, and I definitely don't believe that on that point. So I hope that addresses that issue. And it's like I say, I've got nothing but respect for women.
There was actually quite a lot of the women in that Makerfield audience looking pretty unimpressed, I have to say. And it got worse for Kenyon when Sarah Wakefield for the Green Party chimed in.
I actually spoke to Carol Vorderman this morning. She called me because she is really distressed that you have failed to apologise for any of these comments. So you said
about her specifically?
Her specifically. And she is watching at home tonight. And I wonder if you can look down that camera and say to Carol, you know what? I'm sorry. Can you do that?
You know what? People have probably seen what's been said, but I never actually said anything to Carol. I commented on a comment. Okay. Don't get me wrong, it was a disgusting comment that somebody else had written, but I commented on the comment.
With approval?
Okay.
Pardon?
With approval?
No, it was a crass joke, and it's not something I'd say now.
Can I just say,
every
woman in this room and at home has been subject to shaming, whether in person or online.
And that's disgusting. It's horrible, yeah.
I think you're just proving my point. Can you believe this? Honestly, we have all been subjected to it. And the fact that a man like you cannot sit and do a simple apology, I think is disgraceful. But on top of that, reforms policies on women are shocking. Right. Reform on day one wants to repeal the Equality Act. That is your party policy. I can't believe, as a mum of a young daughter, I'm having to sit here in 2026 and make the case for me and my daughter to have the right for equal pay. This is what the Reform Party stand for. They are a party that has a problem with women and they need to sort it out.
Well, Kenyon wouldn't apologise. He did have an answer on the policy front.
So we will replace the Equalities Act with the Workplace Fairness Act, and a lot of all those women's protections will carry over into the new Act.
All
No
right. So
women's
say-
hard-fought women's protections will suffer or be scrapped. They'll all go over, especially with maternity and pregnancy.
Aaron, does reform have a women problem? It certainly looked like it in that audience.
Yes, 100%. And they have a women's problem in a number of ways. One is that women are less likely to vote for them. And if they want to get over the line in terms of a majority, they're going to need more women to vote for them. This is one of the reasons why, not that they don't believe in it as an issue, but it's one of the reasons why they talk about sexual assault, why they talk about grooming gangs, etc. These are huge issues. They have been abhorrent historically. They've been very poorly dealt with by successive governments. But I think one of the reasons politically why they focus on it, one of the reasons, they believe in all of it. But I think it is an important way of activating voters they previously couldn't access, which is mums, which is middle-aged women, right? I think any sensible person out there is going to hear these kinds of stories and think this is revolting. I want something done about it. And the truth is that the two major parties actually didn't do very much about it. So there's a political logic at work. Again, to repeat, I don't think they're doing it just because of that. But I think, it activates a certain demographic they need to get that majority. And some polls which put them over the edge, which put them at 400 plus seats, that's possible if they get more women voters. Right now, it's older voters and it's older men is their bedrock vote. If they can get more women voters, they don't even need young people. That's the real one for them. And that's also, by the way, why they got Sarah Pochinen in Runcorn, their first female MP, who won that by-election there last year, even though I don't think she's a particularly good candidate. Robert Kenyon there, though, showed a few contradictions to them, some challenges. So the reason why he's been selected in that constituency, of course, is because they learned the hard way with Matt Goodwin, parachuting in a celebrity activist, an ideologue. And I think we need more ideologues in politics. I like ideology. But Matt Goodwin is an ideologue. He's a right-wing ideologue. But he wasn't from the area. He wasn't from South Manchester. He's, of course, from south of England. He looks like a home county.
Yeah, he tried very hard to pretend he had some connection, right? But
just open your gob and people know, right? He looks and sounds like a home county's estate agent with his Rolex and his nice suits. And that didn't work. And I think, what Reform then subsequently learned from that was, well, okay, we need a local candidate next time. By the way, look how well the Greens did with Hannah Spencer. We need our Hannah Spencer. Turns out it's not that easy. Hannah Spencer is an extraordinary person, very effective political candidate, great orator, has a great gift for human connection. He doesn't. He's clearly an intelligent guy. He would make a good councillor for Reform or a good Tory councillor. I'm not suggesting he should be nowhere near public service. Again, I don't agree with him, all those comments, but from that side of politics, you can see why he would be a councillor or even a council group leader or a council leader. But in terms of a politician with a national profile, he's clearly not good enough. He's clearly not Andy Burnham. He's clearly not Hannah Spencer. And so that's the challenge there for Reform is we want the everyman, we want the local candidate. Okay, but you also do need that extra bit. He also said something against Burnham, which was, I won't be a career politician, I'm from here. Burnham lives there. His kids his 3 children all went to school inside the constituency. So the fact he's using attack lines for a candidate who isn't standing for Labour, who would have been a candidate that they otherwise probably would have picked, right, like they did in Gorton Denton, a suboptimal candidate. He's using those attack lines, which I think shows how much trouble they're in. Burnham ultimately is proving much more effective, and I think we're going to talk about this a little bit in a minute. Burnham is proving much more effective in hegemonising the left vote, squeezing the Lib Dems, squeezing the Greens, than he is in squeezing Restore. That's the big problem for Reform in the constituency. So Robert Kenyon, I have no personal animus against him. I think he dealt with all that terribly. All he has to do is just say, I'm really sorry, it's appalling. I'm happy to, once I'm an MP, once I'm in the Houses of Parliament representing the great people of this constituency, I'm really happy to meet Carol Vorderman. I'll apologise to her face to face, very happy to do it. All he has to say, for some reason he can't do it. If you can't do that, if you can't think in those terms, if you can't respond on your feet in a situation like that, sadly, you're not gonna be a national political figure, nor do you deserve to be.
Yeah, I think he also just handed Sarah Wakefield moments, right? When he's like speaking over her and she's like, look, he's doing it again. Look at what you've got. On the Burnham hoovering up the left vote, I mean, we're going to come to it in a minute, but I think it's worth pointing out that, like, on my understanding, the Greens are actually just doing very, very little there to try and challenge him. But I think they, obviously taking every opportunity to field or to show a possible future candidate somewhere else, because I think Sarah Wakefield's performance on Question Time was very solid for someone I haven't seen much of before.
She's great. I mean, also, she might run in local elections, and they might build an operation out from there. I mean, it's important to say that in Manchester, I don't know how many councillors they had, but they did have councillors, when they won in Gorton and Denton. This is not somewhere they would be targeting. Gorton Denton is very much Manchester.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
Denton less so, but the Gorton, Levenshulme is definitely somewhere that you walk around, it should be green. There's parts of my constituency, Portsmouth South, I walk around, this should be green. You walk around Portsmouth North, this should be reform. This constituency, I'm going up there later today, is certainly not, this should be green. So I think you're right. She's playing a clever game, both personally, for the long term, but also I think the Greens are playing a clever game. I think withdrawing and not standing a candidate would have been a really stupid, ill-advised thing to do. By having a candidate and not really campaigning hard, you are, on the one hand, helping to influence the broader political conditions, the tone and tenor of the conversation. But on the other, you're not really undermining Burnham's vote. You're most certainly hurting Kenyon's. And you're making him look like a minority figure. When you've got her and Burnham on the same platform, both attacking him from the left, that helps Burnham. Yeah. So I think it's a smart move. It's a smart move by the Greens to have her there.
Also, in such a high-profile by-election, it gives the Greens a chance to air their policies to the nation. Yeah. Ahead of other elections, the general election. All right. Now, you said you're going up to the constituency tonight. What are you expecting to find there? Who are you going to talk to? What do you want to find out?
I never have preconceptions before we do these things. We're going to a site which was just I think it's one of the largest fly tipping sites in Northwest history.
Exciting.
My kind of gig, right? Like thousands and thousands of kilos, of tens of thousands of kilos of crap just dumped. So that'd be fun. And the authorities didn't really do much about it for a long time. I want to talk to Reform and Tory voters who like Burnham, because the last time I was in Gorton and Denton, I met lots of those people. I remember speaking to some people, a couple, they had voted Brexit, they'd voted for Boris, they never vote Labour, except in mayoral elections when they vote for Andy Burnham. And I think the Reform sort of people you see on X, the centre-right pundits you see on TV, I don't think they're aware of this. I think any other candidate for Labour in this constituency would have been smashed. The fact that it's even close is a real testament to Burnham's personal political brand in the area.
Great. Well, we look forward to that. That's going to be a Bastani's Britain.
Be a Bastani's Britain.
Great.
Should be out next week.
Excellent.
If you're in Denton, if you're in Makerfield or Wigan, get in touch.
Do it.
My DMs are open on X.
All right, let's move on with this story. Reform UK have been in the news this week for another reason. On Tuesday, police body cam footage of the dying moments of 18-year-old Southampton student Henry Novak was released. In it, we saw the police handcuff the stabbed teenager, ignore his protest that he couldn't breathe, and when he tried to tell them he'd been stabbed, one replied with, "I don't think you have, mate." And while his actual murderer, Vikram Digwa, stood by, telling the police he'd been racially assaulted and pointing to non-existent bruises on his eye. It was a truly, disgusting scene, burned into all of our minds. And it probably wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that the entire country was gripped by anger, despair, and disgust. But Reform leader Nigel Farage went further, telling his supporters, quote, "I suggest the rest of us respond to this with pure, cold rage." Later that night, there were scenes of violence on the streets of Southampton, with fires set and wheelie bins, bricks, bottles, and other projectiles thrown at police, all while members of extreme right-wing parties and groups participated. 11 police officers, all, as far as we know, uninvolved in the shocking negligence around Henry Novak's care, were injured. Nigel Farage was repeatedly asked to condemn that violence in Parliament on Wednesday. He wouldn't. On Question Time, Robert Kenyon, his candidate in Makerfield, was given a chance instead.
I'd just like to ask, in terms of Nigel Farage not condemning the violence that went on the other evening, would Rob Kerr too condemn it this evening?
Okay, let me just briefly allow you to do that if you want to. you're being asked, do you want to condemn the violence that took place in Southampton?
100% condemn the violence. Violence is not the answer to this. What we need to do is make sure we do it politically, and we reforms policies to get 30,000 extra police officers on the street, and ban knives regardless of religious background. That we ban knives completely.
So there's the Reform candidate in Makerfield just, straight away condemning the violence in Southampton, something that I think Farage has now done. He only did it quite late yesterday in an exclusive with GB News, but he held off for good 48 hours or so. What do you make of it what is the politics here? Like, Farage won't do it, or won't do it for a long time. Kenyon does it straight away. Does he understand the Makerfield constituency better than, does he understand it in a way that means that that's like really necessary there? Although perhaps Farage is talking to people for whom if they really don't want to hear an apology or a condemnation about the violence.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I never really understand these things because, of course, there's sometimes violence by people on the left, and people are calling on you to condemn it. And, it's possible to explain something without excusing it, isn't it? You just say, look, something awful has happened. Some people have chosen to do this. I don't think that's ideal or it's going to work.
Oh, hang on. He did say you should respond with pure cold rage.
No, but that's my point. You don't need to do that. I'm saying with regards to Kenyon.
Oh, I see. Okay, sorry.
It's a very easy thing to do. Just say, look, there's an explanation why people be so angry. I don't think that's right, but you can understand why they do it. That's sort of Michael Walker take, isn't it? It's quite easy thing to do. And so you're right. It's all the more puzzling that Farage wouldn't do it for so long. And I think there's only one reason why that's the case. 2 words: Rupert Lowe.
Yeah, we're coming to that.
And it's about Restore. We're going to talk about all of this, but Restore is the potential, jack in the box variable for this by-election. And that's, I think, the entire explanation starts and ends there as to why Farage wouldn't apologise or condemn, apologise for comments or condemn what's happened, because he's a canny enough political operator to know that you can do that, show a bit of leg to your supporters, and then wind things back 48 hours later. He hasn't done that here because I don't think he thinks he can.
It's interesting. We've spoken so many times on this show about what Reform's electoral strategy is. And one thing that's been really clear is that if they want to be the party of government, they actually have to appeal quite broadly. They have to get a lot of Tories. And I just wonder if maybe Farage just acted very quickly under the pressure of Restore in the wake of the Novak body tape, because you really don't appeal to Tories by encouraging people to go and attack the police. You really don't appeal to Tories by looking like you're telling people to go out and do street violence. That's not what Tories are into, right? Tories like the police and they like safe streets. So, was it a strategic wobble? Is it really just rattled by Restore to such an extent that he's actually not thinking very clearly?
Yeah, I think 100%. And, in a way he's lucky because what happened in Southampton was bad, but it could have been a lot worse.
Yeah.
And if somebody dies, if a police officer is, critically injured, if a female police officer gets hit on the head with a brick and she's in a coma, Farage is screwed.
Yeah, finished.
Right? And I don't think they really, thought it through. And I think it's something I've thought about a lot with Reform politicians, is that they're so online, particularly on X, they are so eager to insert themselves within, real-time politics, often to their benefit. But I think sometimes that can really be to their detriment. You saw that, I think, for the first time, really, with Matt Goodwin in the by-election in Galston and Denton. He was constantly trying to insert himself in real-time debates online. And, Hannah Spencer was just knocking on doors and talking to people about potholes in local businesses and business rates and litter,
Yeah.
So it's good in terms of getting, national polling and whatnot, but in a by-election, it's not the best bet. And I think Kenyon probably knows that too. But it's the modus operandi which has got Farage where he is. Is that enough then to A, get you into government, but also B, to govern? Kemi Badenoch had a great line, actually. We don't need rage, we need courage. It's true. You need courage, and you need to offer substantive responses, political and policy responses. And I don't see them coming from Reform. I just don't see them coming from Reform on issue after issue. Maybe migration, you can say. I don't agree with any of it, of course, but you can. There's a coherent policy platform. But on the police, I don't know what are they going to abolish? Are they going to abolish, county forces and go to a national force. So they're going to completely redo training. There's an interesting analogue here, by the way, and I don't like reductio ad Hitlerums, but the National Socialists, I can't remember what part of Germany it was in, but they get in the very early 30s. They join a coalition governing a part of Germany, and this is crazy. And they get a position. Some, senior Third Reich scholar will be in the comments. And do you know what job they want? No. They want two jobs. One is they want to rewrite the school curriculum. Surprise! And another one is to do with policing.
Right, okay.
And particularly on the school curriculum one, it just collapses. It's appalling, which is one of the reasons why, years later with Hindenburg and the liberals, they say, oh, well, you can let the Nazis run things because they screw it all up anyway, which was true. But, I do feel like on this stuff, you can't govern by, excuse my French, you can't govern by fucking viral tweets.
No.
And hashtags and clout and, getting eyeballs onto GB News. It's really good in opposition. It's really good for a social movement. I would like the left to do that sometimes on some things. You can't govern like that. You can't govern like that.
You also can't govern on disunity, right? Which is that what seems to have been encouraged there, and especially like again the other political moment is as I said in the piece, everybody felt the same way about that body cam. It's not like there were some people who were like, oh well, who cares? Everybody who saw it felt disgusted, angry, so on, and yet Farage didn't seem to be able to grab the kind of unity that exists, the compassion people felt for that poor teenage boy and the anger they felt with the police.
Yeah,
he had to find the wedge, and maybe that's just the habit. He's always got to find the wedge.
It's the muscle memory, right?
So the muscle memory, right. Yeah.
He could have got that issue and say, you know what, we can get 70% of the public on this, 75%. There are big problems with the police, whether you're on the right or the left, town or country. There's a consensus emerging there. But he can't do it because the muscle memory is polarization, wedge issues, exactly. 52-48. But hold on, you've got 80% of people with you. You don't need to do that, Nigel.
Maybe there'll be a contender to replace him pretty soon, actually, because that is actually really dumb political thinking, right? That's a really not to be able to control your own instincts when the situation has changed. I think is the sign of a poor politician. They become predictable and then they lose.
Well, he's an outstanding campaigner, but also to their credit, let's say, they're trying to do what should be politically impossible, to go from no MPs to government in under a decade, to go from 4 MPs in 2024 to a majority by 2029. That should be impossible, and that would take a political genius. But I think, if you're going to do that, then like you say, you need the Tory voters. Sometimes do need to be a coalition builder and actually bring people in. There's a part of me that's really surprised that Reform haven't tried to get in more left-coded people and arguments. They did it a little bit with steel nationalisation, but since then, they've gone generic, Tory, and now they've really doubled down on the radical right stuff with Rupert Lowe.
Yeah.
Which, you can still be a really big party in Parliament. I don't doubt that for a second, but it does make achieving that majority at Westminster at the next general election that bit harder.
Let's go on to the polls because they are something else to look at. So on that question time panel, we had Labour, Reform, the Greens, the Tories, and the Lib Dems, which means there was one very noticeable absence, made even more noticeable when you look at current, very, very strange or unusual polling happening in Makerfield. Polling by Salvation shows that Andy Burnham enjoys a 10-point lead in the constituency, with almost half of those polled behind him. Next comes Reform's Robert Kenyon on 39%, and this is where it gets really interesting. The next most popular candidate, and then they're most popular in third place by quite a long way, with 8% of the vote, is Rebecca Shepherd from Restore. And she did not have a seat at the question time panel. So as you saw there, the Lib Dems, the Tories, the Greens, all with a fraction of the vote amongst them were there. Rebecca Shepherd, who is in third place, and actually taking away winning votes from Reform, the votes needed to close that gap with Burnham wasn't there. Rupert Lowe, Bristol's founder, is pretty furious about it. He's penned an open letter to the BBC demanding to know why the party was snubbed. In reply, a BBC spokesperson said this: there are 14 candidates in the Makerfield by-election on the 18th of June. Question Time has invited 5 parties to take part in our debate in the constituency, based, as is always the case, on their past and current electoral support. The programme will ensure there are appropriate references to all the candidates standing. the BBC, Aaron, doesn't seem to know what's going on, because if you're just going to base things on previous electoral support, you're just not going to be keeping up with the politics as it's changing in this country so quickly.
No.
So what do you think is going on here in Makerfield with Restore? And yeah, why did the BBC snub them?
Well, if Restore keep their deposit, which is to say if they get more than 5%, I think this is really bad of the BBC. I suspect that Restore will come third. That could be 5%, that could be 10%. Famous last words, they get 3%. But I do think in almost all likelihood they will come third, because that Lib Dem and that Green vote is being so squeezed, and the Tories, if you look at some of the polling, 2%. It's moving about a bit, but tiny polling for the Tories in the constituency. They made the same mistake with Gorton Denton. I mean, that's crazy, because you could, at least in their defence here, they'll say, well, look, Restore only have 1 MP. The Greens had 4 MPs from the last general election. And on the night of the vote in Gorton and Denton, I'll never forget it, on the night of the vote, there wasn't a Green candidate, a Green spokesperson rather, on BBC Question Time, nor the week before. And I just said, this is crazy. She might not win. She might come second, but she's making the political weather along with Reform, and they have 4 MPs. What on earth are you doing? And also, by the way, it's a huge story. Even if the Greens come second, they've finished ahead of Labour, who are lagging nationally. There was a huge public interest in platforming the Greens in Gorton Denton. They didn't do it. I don't think this is quite that bad. But, it's not like Restore have no MPs. Rupert Lowe is an MP. They did win councillors. I think they won 19, 20 councillors in the local elections. They are a political party. It's not some joke party like UKIP now with Nick Tenconi. They're a real party. And, if they come third, I think it's awful. And this is the BBC, I'm afraid. They just pursue the path of least resistance, uninteresting content. They don't challenge themselves or their audiences. And like you say, you can do that when it's Labour, Tory, Tory, Labour, Labour, Tory, Lib Dem, Labour, Tory. But British politics is changing so fast now. Look at somewhere like Wales. Plaid Cymru come first, Reform come second. You have to start thinking differently in terms of how you cover these stories.
Yeah, totally. All right, Aaron, I'm going to let you go. You've got to get a train to Makerfield, to Wigan. Hope you have a really great time. Thank you very much for joining me tonight.
My pleasure. And also, look, these are great shirts.
Yeah.
Aren't they great shirts? Some wise guy, Tom Clements, will say on the Novara Slack channel, I think we should do football shirts. I think, I like the idea, but this could be terribly executed. They're gorgeous. Well done, Tom.
I love the way it just happens. Like one day you see a suggestion, and the next day you've got some actually quite swish kit.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Also, it's got our names on the back, although I'm borrowing one for tonight because I left mine at home. All right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Have a great time in Makerfield. Do come back on Monday for another live show. For now, you've been watching Novara Media. Good night.